In the farthest reaches of ancient Egypt, where stone pillars rise against unforgiving blue skies and the Nile whispers millennia-old secrets, a forbidden story dares to defy destiny. She, a priestess of dazzling beauty, whose heart belonged to the gods and whose vows were unbreakable. He, a visionary architect, whose hands built the future while his soul longed for an impossible love. A pharaoh's tomb, guardian of buried truths, holds the key to a dark past threatening to consume the present. A wrenching choice between sacred duty and overwhelming desire awaits. Prepare to be transported by the Pharaoh's tomb's secret, forever change the love between the priestess and the architect. Before we dive into this epic saga of passion and betrayal, tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what fascinates you most about period romances? The golden rays of dawn pierce through the limestone columns of the Temple of Hathor, casting ethereal shadows across the polished marble floor as the sacred city of Thebes awakened to another day in the year 1321 before the birth of Christ. In the heart of Egypt's religious capital, where the mighty Nile flowed like liquid silver between papyrus-lined banks, the ancient gods still held dominion over mortal hearts, and none more so than within the hallowed walls where Nefertari knelt in silent devotion. The young priestess moved with the fluid grace of one born to serve the divine, her slender fingers trembling slightly as she lit the sacred incense before the towering golden statue of Hathor. The goddess of love and beauty gazed down with serene cowhorn-crowned majesty, her eternal smile seeming to hold secrets that mortals could never fully comprehend. Wisps of frankincense and myrrh spiraled upward like prayers made visible, filling the chamber with an intoxicating perfume that had blessed this sacred space for countless generations. At 19 years of age, Nefertari had achieved what no other woman before her had accomplished, becoming the youngest priestess ever to attain the sacred rank of divine servant within Hathor's temple. Her beauty was legendary throughout Thebes, with skin like burnished gold and eyes as dark as the depths of the sacred lake. Long black hair cascaded down her back in waves that caught the morning light, adorned with delicate lotus blossoms that seemed to bloom more vibrantly in her presence. The white linen of her ceremonial dress clung to her graceful form, its pleated perfection marking her as one chosen by the gods themselves. Yet beneath the serene mask of devotion, a restless spirit stirred within her breast. As she completed the morning ritual, her gaze drifted toward the high windows that offered glimpses of the bustling world beyond the temple walls. Merchants called out their wares in the marketplace, children laughed as they chased each other through narrow streets, and somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic chanting of workers building monuments to eternity echoed across the sacred city. Her prayers, which should have flowed like the Nile itself, faltered as she watched a pair of ibis birds soar freely across the azure sky, their wings carrying them wherever their hearts desired. The sound of approaching footsteps on marble drew her attention back to the present. High Priestess Nebet entered the chamber with the measured dignity befitting her exalted position, her graying hair hidden beneath an elaborate golden headdress adorned with the sacred symbols of their goddess. Though past her 40th year, Nebet carried herself with the regal bearing of one who had spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of palace politics and religious hierarchy. "My child," Nebet's voice carried the weight of authority tempered by genuine affection. "The morning prayers have been completed with your usual devotion. But today brings news that will change the rhythm of our sacred duties." Nefertari rose gracefully, her hands clasped before her in the traditional gesture of respect. "I am ready to serve as the goddess wills, revered mother." A shadow crossed Nebet's weathered features as she moved closer, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Pharaoh I has commanded that the great tomb construction, begun during the blessed reign of young Tutankhamun, must be completed with unprecedented haste. A new architect has arrived from Memphis, one whose methods are said to be revolutionary, though some whisper they border on the sacrilegious." The older woman's eyes held depths of concern that spoke of knowledge carefully guarded. In recent months, Nebet had witnessed troubling changes within the palace walls. Noble families who had served Egypt for generations found themselves suddenly out of favor, their patriarchs meeting untimely ends that were attributed to everything from hunting accidents to sudden illnesses. The very air within the royal court seemed poisoned with suspicion and fear. "The construction requires monthly blessings from our temple," Nebet continued, her gaze studying Nefertari's face intently. "Given your pure reputation and unwavering devotion, you have been chosen for this sacred honor. You will oversee the spiritual aspects of this monumental undertaking." Nefertari's heart quickened with an emotion she couldn't quite name. The prospect of leaving the familiar confines of the temple, even temporarily, sent a thrill through her that she struggled to suppress. "I am honored by this trust, revered mother." When do these duties begin? Today, Nebet replied, though her expression remained troubled. But remember, child, we live in times when even the gods seem to test the faithful with unusual trials. Keep your eyes open and your heart guarded. Not all who serve the pharaoh serve Egypt's true interests. The construction site lay beyond the sacred district, where the eternal monuments of pharaohs past rose like stone prayers against the endless blue sky. As Nefertari approached in her ceremonial litter, carried by 4 temple servants, she could hear the sounds of organized labor echoing across the desert air. The rhythmic pounding of hammers, the scraping of stone against stone, and the voices of men working in harmony created a symphony of human endeavor that stirred something deep within her soul. But as her litter was lowered to the ground and she stepped onto the sandy earth, what she witnessed defied every expectation she had harbored. Instead of the traditional methods passed down through generations of Egyptian builders, she found herself observing a construction site that seemed touched by foreign magic. Massive stone blocks that should have required dozens of men to move were being lifted with ingenious systems of ropes and pulleys. Ramps spiraled around the emerging structure at angles that seemed to mock the sacred geometry her people had perfected over millennia. Workers moved with an efficiency that was both impressive and deeply unsettling to eyes trained in the ancient ways. At the center of this controlled chaos stood a man unlike any she had ever encountered. Tall and lean, with the sun-bronzed skin of one who labored under Ra's burning gaze, he directed the work with an authority that was both commanding and surprisingly gentle. His hair, darker than a moonless night, caught the desert breeze as he gestured toward a particularly complex arrangement of stone and rope. When he turned, she caught sight of eyes the color of liquid amber, burning with an intelligence and passion that made her breath catch in her throat. The workers, she noticed with growing alarm, whispered among themselves as they labored. Their voices carried words that chilled her: foreign sorcery, abandonment of the gods, rituals ignored. Each phase of traditional construction was accompanied by specific ceremonies, prayers, and offerings that had been observed since the time of the first pharaohs. Yet this man seemed to proceed with no regard for such sacred customs. Seneb, for that was the name by which the workers addressed him, moved with the confidence of one accustomed to command. His hands, she observed, bore the calluses of honest labor, yet they moved with the precision of an artist as he adjusted measurements and directed the placement of massive stones. There was something magnetic about his presence, a quality that drew the eye and held it captive. As if sensing her scrutiny, he turned toward her approach. The moment their eyes met across the dusty expanse of the construction site, something electric passed between them, a recognition that transcended the boundaries of their vastly different worlds. His amber gaze swept over her ceremonial white robes and golden jewelry, taking in every detail of her appearance with an intensity that made her skin warm beneath the desert sun. "You must be the priestess sent to bless our work," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of distant lands and foreign education. There was no deference in his tone, no automatic genuflection before her religious authority. Instead, he regarded her with the frank assessment of an equal, something that was both shocking and strangely thrilling. "I am Nefertari, divine servant of Hathor," she replied, drawing upon every lesson in dignity and composure she had ever received. "I have come to ensure that this sacred construction proceeds with the proper respect for the gods and the ancient traditions of our people." A smile played at the corners of his mouth, transforming his serious features into something dangerously appealing. "And I am Seneb, architect and engineer, come from Memphis to complete what others could not finish. Though I suspect, divine servant, that we may have very different ideas about what constitutes proper respect for the divine." The challenge in his words was unmistakable, delivered with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Yet beneath the surface provocation she sensed something else, a genuine passion for his craft that reminded her uncomfortably of her own suppressed longings for something beyond the prescribed boundaries of her existence. "Your methods," she began, her voice carrying the full authority of her position, "mock the ancient ways that have served Egypt since the time of the first pharaohs. These innovations you employ show disrespect for traditions blessed by the gods themselves." His amber eyes flashed with an inner fire as he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the intricate details of his sun-weathered face and catch the scent of honest sweat mixed with something indefinably masculine. "And your ancient ways," he replied, his voice low and intense, "have built tombs that crumble while foreign monuments stand for millennia. Perhaps the gods favor progress over blind tradition. Perhaps they sent me here to show Egypt that there are other paths to greatness." The audacity of his words should have outraged her. Instead, they sent a thrill through her that was both terrifying and exhilarating. No one had ever dared to challenge her beliefs so directly, to force her to examine the foundations upon which her entire life had been built. The intensity of his gaze seemed to see past her ceremonial robes and sacred titles to the restless woman beneath. From somewhere nearby she heard a soft chuckle. A younger man, stockier and darker skinned than Seneb, approached with an expression of barely contained amusement. His clothing marked him as a skilled craftsman, and the easy familiarity with which he regarded his master spoke of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than mere hierarchy. "Master," the man said, his eyes twinkling with mirth, "perhaps you should show the divine servant the progress we have made rather than debating theology under the burning sun." Seneb's expression softened slightly as he glanced at his assistant. "Nefertari, may I present Kamwasit, my most trusted aide and the finest stone carver in all of Memphis. Kamwasit, this is the priestess who will be overseeing the spiritual aspects of our work." Kamwasit bowed respectfully, though she caught the knowing look he exchanged with his master. It was the expression of a man who had witnessed something significant, though she couldn't quite fathom what that might be. As Seneb began to explain the innovations he had implemented, his passion for his craft became evident in every gesture and word. He spoke of load distribution and structural integrity, of methods learned from master builders in distant lands, of techniques that could create monuments to rival the pyramids themselves. Despite her determination to maintain proper disapproval, Nefertari found herself drawn into his enthusiasm, fascinated by the intelligence that burned behind those remarkable amber eyes. The tour of the construction site revealed marvels that challenged everything she thought she knew about building and engineering. Yet with each innovation he showed her, each explanation of foreign techniques adapted to Egyptian needs, she felt the foundations of her carefully ordered world shifting beneath her feet. When the time came for her departure, she found herself reluctant to leave this place where tradition and innovation clashed in ways that were both disturbing and strangely exciting. As she walked toward her waiting litter, she felt his gaze following her every step. At the last moment, some impulse she couldn't name made her turn back for one final look. He was standing exactly where she had left him, his tall frame silhouetted against the partially completed tomb, his amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart race. In that moment, something passed between them that was deeper than words, more profound than the philosophical differences that separated their worlds. It was a recognition of kindred spirits, of two souls who had found something in each other that they hadn't even known they were seeking. The journey back to the temple passed in a haze of confused emotions. The familiar sights of Thebes, the bustling markets, the sacred monuments, the orderly processions of priests and pilgrims, seemed somehow different, as if she were seeing them through new eyes. The very air felt charged with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. As evening approached and the temple prepared for the sacred sunset prayers, Nefertari made her way through corridors that had been her entire world for most of her life. The familiar rituals that had once brought her peace now felt constraining, like beautiful chains that bound her to a destiny she had never chosen for herself. It was while passing through the outer courtyard that she overheard the conversation that would plant the first seeds of the conspiracy that would eventually consume them all. Two figures stood in the shadows between towering columns, their voices low but carrying clearly in the still evening air. "The pharaoh's favor must be maintained at all costs," came the voice of Amenhotep, a priest whose devotion to duty was matched only by his ambition for advancement. "These are dangerous times, and we must be vigilant against any influence that might threaten the stability of the realm." "What of the new architect?" asked his companion, another priest whose name she couldn't quite catch. "His methods are certainly unconventional. That is precisely why we must monitor the situation closely," Amenhotep replied, his tone carrying an edge of something that might have been jealousy or fear. "I have been asked to observe temple activities and report any suspicious behavior to the palace officials. We must protect Egypt from foreign influences that could corrupt our sacred traditions." The words sent a chill through Nefertari's heart, though she couldn't fully understand why. There was something in Amenhotep's tone, something in the way he spoke of monitoring and reporting, that suggested forces at work beyond her comprehension. She hurried past without revealing her presence, but the conversation echoed in her mind like a warning bell. As the temple bells called the faithful to evening prayers, Nefertari took her place among her sister priestesses in the great hall. The familiar rituals unfolded around her, the lighting of sacred lamps, the burning of precious incense, the chanting of prayers that had been spoken in this place for countless generations. Yet for the first time in her life, she found herself unable to concentrate on the sacred words. Instead, her thoughts were consumed by amber eyes that had challenged everything she believed, by a voice that had dared to question the very foundations of her faith, by the memory of a man who had looked at her not as a sacred vessel of the gods but as a woman with thoughts and desires of her own. The carefully ordered world she had known since childhood had been shaken to its very core, and she found herself both terrified and exhilarated by the possibilities that lay ahead. As the last prayer faded into silence and the priestesses began to disperse to their evening duties, Nefertari remained kneeling before the altar of Hathor. The goddess of love gazed down at her with that eternal smile, as if she knew secrets that her devoted servant was only beginning to discover. In the flickering light of the sacred lamps, the golden statue seemed almost alive, her eyes holding depths of knowledge about the human heart that transcended the boundaries between mortal and divine. The young priestess closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words that came were not the familiar liturgies of her training. Instead, she found herself asking questions that had no easy answers, seeking guidance for a path that had not been laid out in any sacred text. The gods, it seemed, had sent her a test in the form of a man whose very existence challenged everything she had been taught to believe. As the temple settled into the peaceful quiet of evening, Nefertari finally rose from her knees and made her way to her simple cell. But sleep would not come easily this night, for her dreams would be filled with amber eyes and challenging words that had awakened something within her soul that could never again be silenced. The sacred flames of Hathor's temple burned on through the darkness, casting dancing shadows on ancient walls that had witnessed countless human dramas unfold. But none, perhaps, had ever held the potential to reshape not only individual destinies but the very foundations of an empire. For in the heart of a young priestess, forces had been set in motion that would test the boundaries between duty and desire, tradition and innovation, the sacred and the profane. The gods, it seemed, had indeed sent temptation in the most beautiful form imaginable. The sacred calendar of Hathor's temple marked the passage of 3 weeks with the precision of celestial movements, yet for Nefertari time had taken on an entirely different rhythm. Each dawn brought the anticipation of her monthly blessing duties at the construction site, and each sunset left her heart more entangled in emotions she dared not name. The routine visits that should have been simple ceremonial obligations had transformed into elaborate dances of verbal sparring, where every word exchanged with Seneb carried layers of meaning that went far beyond discussions of architecture and tradition. The young priestess found herself inventing reasons to extend her stays at the tomb site, lingering over blessing rituals that should have taken mere minutes, asking detailed questions about construction techniques that she had never cared about before. Meanwhile, Seneb had begun timing his most complex work to coincide with her visits, ensuring that she would witness the full scope of his innovations. Their conversations had evolved from hostile confrontations to passionate debates about the nature of progress, the will of the gods, and the delicate balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. During the quiet hours between her temple duties, Nefertari often found herself standing at the high windows of her chamber, gazing toward the construction site where she knew he labored under the burning sun. The very air seemed charged with an energy that had not existed before his arrival in Thebes, as if the gods themselves were holding their breath to see what would unfold between the devoted priestess and the revolutionary architect. At the construction site, Kamwasit observed his master's transformation with the knowing wisdom of one who had served Seneb for many years. The confident architect who had never shown interest in anything beyond his craft now peppered his assistant with questions about Egyptian customs, religious practices, and the intricate social hierarchies that governed temple life. "Tell me about the priestesses of Hathor," Seneb would ask as they worked side by side, his hands never pausing in their precise movements but his mind clearly elsewhere. "What does their training involve? What vows do they take?" Kamwasit would smile knowingly as he answered, recognizing the signs of a man whose heart had been captured despite his best intentions. "They are bound by sacred oaths of celibacy, master. Their lives belong entirely to the goddess, and any deviation from their vows is punishable by death. The temple considers them vessels of divine purity, untouchable by mortal desires." The information only seemed to deepen Seneb's fascination rather than discourage it. He would fall silent for long periods, his amber eyes distant as he contemplated the impossible gulf that separated his world from hers. Yet when Nefertari arrived for her blessing ceremonies, that same intensity would focus entirely on her, as if she were the most fascinating architectural puzzle he had ever encountered. Through conversations with the workers, a different picture of the construction project began to emerge. The men spoke in hushed tones about the urgency that drove their efforts, the pressure from palace officials to complete the tomb with unprecedented speed. Pharaoh I, they whispered, was determined to hold the dedication ceremony before the first anniversary of young Tutankhamun's death, as if the timing held some symbolic significance that would legitimize his rule in the eyes of both gods and mortals. What Seneb did not know, what none of the workers dared to speak aloud, was the darker purpose behind his selection for this project. Palace guards had been overheard discussing plans to clean up loose ends once the tomb was completed, ensuring that no witnesses remained to testify about the foreign methods used in its construction. The architect's innovative techniques, so desperately needed for the project's success, would also seal his fate once their usefulness had ended. The arrival of Princess Ankhesenamen at the temple brought an unexpected element to the carefully ordered world of religious routine. The young widow, draped in the black and silver of royal mourning, sought audience with High Priestess Nebet under the pretense of seeking spiritual guidance for her overwhelming grief. Her beauty was legendary throughout Egypt, but sorrow had carved delicate lines around her dark eyes and given her an ethereal quality that spoke of suffering beyond her years. In the privacy of Nebet's chambers, surrounded by ancient scrolls and the comforting scent of sacred herbs, the princess revealed details about her husband's final days that sent chills through the older woman's experienced heart. Tutankhamun had complained of sudden weakness that came and went like desert winds, of strange dreams that haunted his sleep, and most disturbing of all, of a peculiar sweet taste that lingered in his mouth after meals. Nebet, whose training in temple medicine encompassed knowledge of both healing and harmful substances, recognized these symptoms with growing alarm. The combination of weakness, vivid dreams, and the distinctive sweet taste spoke of a particular type of poisoning, one that could be administered gradually over time to avoid suspicion. Yet she held her tongue, knowing that such accusations without proof would mean death for them all. The physicians could find nothing wrong, the princess continued, her voice barely above a whisper. They spoke of divine will, of the gods calling him home. But I cannot shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that my beloved husband was taken from me by more than fate alone. The conversation planted seeds of suspicion in Nebet's mind that would grow in the weeks to come, adding another layer of complexity to the political undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface of temple life. The high priestess found herself studying the faces of visiting palace officials with new eyes, wondering which among them might harbor secrets dark enough to murder a pharaoh. As the sacred calendar approached the festival of Hathor, the temple began its elaborate preparations for the annual celebration of love and beauty. For 3 days and nights, the usual restrictions would be relaxed, allowing for music, dancing, and the kind of joyous celebration that honored the goddess in all her aspects. The festival represented one of the few times when the rigid boundaries between sacred and secular life became permeable, when even the most devoted priestesses were encouraged to embrace the full spectrum of human emotion. Nefertari threw herself into the festival preparations with an enthusiasm that surprised even her closest sisters. She selected her finest ceremonial robes, white linen so pure it seemed to glow in the lamplight, adorned with golden threads that caught and reflected every flicker of flame. Her jewelry, usually simple and understated, was replaced with elaborate pieces that spoke of her high rank within the temple hierarchy. Golden arm bands carved with the sacred symbols of Hathor encircled her slender arms, while a collar of turquoise and carnelian rested against the graceful column of her throat. As the festival began and the temple filled with music and laughter, Nefertari felt more beautiful and alive than ever before. The usual weight of religious duty seemed to lift from her shoulders, replaced by an intoxicating sense of freedom that made her feel as if she could float among the stars themselves. Wine flowed freely, its sweet warmth loosening tongues and hearts alike, while musicians filled the air with melodies that seemed to speak directly to the soul. It was during the height of the evening celebration that Seneb appeared at the temple gates. As part of the construction blessing ceremonies, he had been formally invited to participate in the festival, though his presence among the religious celebrants was unprecedented. He had exchanged his usual work clothes for formal attire befitting the occasion, a longer white linen kilt with pleated front panel and a simple but elegant shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. When their eyes met across the crowded courtyard, the noise and celebration around them seemed to fade into insignificance. The space between them might have been filled with hundreds of people, but in that moment, they were alone in a world of their own creation. The intensity of his gaze sent heat racing through her veins, while the sight of her in all her festival finery left him momentarily breathless. As the evening progressed, they found themselves drawn together as if by invisible threads. Their conversations, overheard by others, appeared to be discussions of architecture and religious philosophy, but beneath the surface lay currents of attraction so powerful they seemed to charge the very air around them. Every gesture, every glance, every carefully chosen word carried meaning that went far beyond its surface interpretation. It was well past midnight when Seneb found Nefertari alone in the temple's moonlit garden, away from the festivities that continued to rage in the main courtyards. The sacred space was transformed by darkness and silver light into something magical, where lotus blossoms released their intoxicating perfume into the warm night air and the distant sound of music created a backdrop of ethereal beauty. She stood beside a reflecting pool, her white robes seeming to glow in the moonlight as she gazed up at the star-filled sky. The golden jewelry at her throat and arms caught the lunar radiance, creating points of light that made her appear almost divine. When she turned at the sound of his approach, her dark eyes held depths that seemed to reflect the mysteries of the universe itself. "I wondered if you would come," she said softly, her voice carrying a vulnerability that she had never allowed herself to show before. "I could not stay away," he replied, moving closer until he could see the rapid pulse at the base of her throat, could catch the subtle scent of lotus oil that perfumed her skin. "You have haunted my thoughts since the moment we first met." In the privacy of the garden, with only the gods as witnesses, they spoke with honesty that daylight would never have permitted. Seneb revealed his passion for creating buildings that would outlast empires, structures that would stand as testaments to human achievement long after their creators had returned to dust. His voice grew animated as he described his vision of monuments that would blend the best of Egyptian tradition with innovations learned from distant lands, creating something entirely new and magnificent. "I want to build something eternal," he confessed, his amber eyes burning with an intensity that took her breath away. "Something that will make the gods themselves pause and wonder at what mortal hands can achieve." Nefertari found herself sharing secrets she had never spoken aloud, confessing her doubts about a life of endless ritual without personal fulfillment, her longing for something beyond the prescribed boundaries of her existence. "Sometimes I feel as if I am disappearing," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle splash of water in the pool. "As if I am becoming nothing more than a vessel for others' expectations, losing myself piece by piece until nothing remains but the role I am expected to play." The pain in her voice moved him more than any architectural marvel ever could. Without conscious thought, he reached out to touch her face, his calloused fingers tracing the delicate line of her cheekbone with a reverence usually reserved for the most precious artifacts. "You could never disappear," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You burn too brightly, shine too clearly. You are the most real thing I have ever encountered in a world full of shadows and pretense." When she challenged him once more about his foreign techniques, asking how he could justify abandoning traditions blessed by the gods themselves, he responded not with words but with action. His hands framed her face as he drew her closer, his amber eyes searching hers for any sign of resistance. "Some things transcend tradition," he whispered against her lips before claiming them in a kiss that shattered every barrier between them. The kiss was everything she had never dared to imagine and more. It spoke of passion held too long in check, of desires that refused to be contained by social conventions or religious vows. Her hands found their way to his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart beneath her palms as she surrendered to sensations that threatened to overwhelm her completely. In that moment, she understood with crystal clarity that her life had been divided into two distinct parts, before this kiss and everything that would come after. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads touching as they struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred. The world around them remained unchanged, but they had been transformed in ways that could never be undone. The harsh light of dawn brought with it the return of reality and all its complications. As Nefertari made her way through the temple corridors toward the morning prayers, she was intercepted by Amenhotep, whose usually composed features were twisted with an emotion she had never seen before. His pale hands shook slightly as he blocked her path, his small dark eyes burning with a mixture of jealousy and righteous indignation. "I saw you," he said without preamble, his voice low but carrying clearly in the empty corridor. "In the garden with that foreign architect. Do you have any idea what you have done?" The blood drained from Nefertari's face as the full implications of his words struck her. Amenhotep had been watching, had witnessed the kiss that had changed everything. The consequences of such knowledge in the wrong hands could mean death not only for herself but for Seneb as well. "I have been asked to monitor temple activities," Amenhotep continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "To report any suspicious behavior to palace officials. They are concerned about foreign influences corrupting our sacred traditions, and now I have seen with my own eyes how right they were to be worried." His words revealed the depth of his conviction that he was protecting Egypt from dangerous outside forces, but beneath his patriotic fervor lay something more personal and infinitely more dangerous. The way his gaze lingered on her face, the tremor in his voice when he spoke her name, betrayed feelings that went far beyond religious duty. "You could lose everything," he said, stepping closer until she could smell the incense that clung to his priestly robes. "Your position, your family's honor, your very life. But it does not have to end that way. There are choices you could make, paths you could take that would ensure your safety and honor." The threat was clear, though unspoken. Amenhotep held her fate in his hands, and the price of his silence would be higher than she could bear to pay. As she looked into his eyes, she saw not the devoted priest she had known since childhood but a man whose unrequited love had twisted into something possessive and dangerous. While Nefertari struggled with the implications of Amenhotep's knowledge, Seneb was making a discovery at the construction site that would change everything they thought they knew about the tomb project. While examining the foundation work in the pre-dawn hours, his experienced eye caught inconsistencies in the stonework that spoke of something hidden beneath the current structure. Careful excavation revealed evidence of an older construction, one that had been deliberately buried and concealed. The chamber appeared to be ancient, its walls bearing hieroglyphs that predated the current dynasty, yet there were signs of recent activity that made no sense. Fresh torch marks on the walls, disturbed dust patterns on the floor, and the faint scent of recent human presence suggested that someone had been using this hidden space as a secret archive. The discovery filled Seneb with a mixture of excitement and unease. His architectural training told him that such chambers were often used to store important documents or treasures, but the evidence of recent use suggested purposes that might be far more sinister. As he stood in the hidden space, surrounded by shadows and secrets, he realized that the tomb project might be about far more than honoring the dead or legitimizing a pharaoh's rule. As evening approached and the temple prepared for the sacred sunset prayers, Nefertari faced the most difficult choice of her life. Duty demanded that she take her place among her sister priestesses, maintaining the facade of devotion that had defined her existence for 19 years. But her heart pulled her toward the construction site, where Seneb waited to show her discoveries that might hold the key to mysteries she was only beginning to understand. Standing at the crossroads between the life she had always known and a future filled with uncertainty and danger, Nefertari made the choice that would set her on a path from which there could be no return. For the first time in her life, she chose love over duty, passion over safety, the unknown over the familiar. As the temple bells called the faithful to prayer and her absence was noted by those who watched for signs of weakness or rebellion, Nefertari walked through the gathering darkness toward a destiny that would test every belief she had ever held sacred. Behind her lay the ordered world of religious devotion and social expectation. Ahead lay love, danger, and secrets that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom she had been raised to serve. The gods, it seemed, had set in motion forces that would transform not only her own fate but the destiny of Egypt itself. The desert night wrapped around Thebes like a velvet shroud, its darkness broken only by the flickering torches that lined the sacred pathways and the silver radiance of stars that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless dynasties. As Nefertari made her way through the shadows toward the construction site, her heart hammered against her ribs with a rhythm that seemed to echo the ancient drums of destiny itself. Each step carried her further from the world she had known and deeper into a realm of uncertainty where passion and peril walked hand in hand. Seneb waited for her at the entrance to the tomb complex, his tall silhouette outlined against the partially completed monument that would serve as either a testament to divine kingship or a monument to deception, depending on truths yet to be revealed. The amber eyes that had haunted her dreams reflected the torchlight as he approached, his expression a mixture of anticipation and something darker that spoke of discoveries that had shaken him to his very core. "You came," he said simply, though the relief in his voice betrayed the depth of his uncertainty. In choosing to meet him rather than attend the evening prayers, she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and they both understood the magnitude of that decision. "I could not stay away," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper as she moved closer to him. The familiar scent of stone dust and honest labor that clung to his skin was now mixed with something else, an undercurrent of tension that spoke of momentous revelations waiting to be shared. Without another word, he led her toward what appeared to be a solid section of the tomb's foundation. His hands moved with practiced precision as he manipulated a series of stones that seemed no different from their neighbors, yet under his touch they shifted and moved with the fluid grace of a mechanism designed by master craftsmen. A narrow opening appeared, barely wide enough for a single person to pass through, revealing a passage that descended into the earth itself. "What I am about to show you," Seneb said as he lit a torch from the flames that burned at the tomb's entrance, "will change everything you believe about this project, about the pharaoh who commissioned it, and about the very foundations upon which Egypt stands." The passage led downward through carefully carved stone, its walls bearing hieroglyphs that seemed to dance in the flickering torchlight. The air grew cooler as they descended, carrying with it the musty scent of ages and the faint trace of recent human presence that seemed oddly out of place in what should have been an undisturbed ancient space. The hidden chamber that opened before them defied every expectation Nefertari might have harbored. The room was vast, its ceiling supported by columns carved with symbols that predated the current dynasty by centuries. Yet scattered throughout the ancient space were clear signs of recent occupation. Fresh torch brackets mounted on the walls, wooden tables laden with papyrus scrolls, and storage containers that bore the royal seal of Pharaoh I himself. This chamber has been used as a secret archive, Seneb explained as he moved through the space with the confidence of one who had already spent considerable time exploring its mysteries. Ancient documents mixed with recent correspondence, genealogical records that span generations alongside letters that bear yesterday's date. Someone has been using this place to hide the most sensitive materials in all of Egypt. Nefertari approached one of the tables with trembling hands, her training in reading ancient texts allowing her to decipher the hieroglyphs that covered the papyrus scrolls. What she found there sent ice through her veins despite the warm desert air above. Detailed records of poison purchases, correspondence with Syrian merchants, and most damning of all, a day-by-day account of young Tutankhamun's final illness that matched perfectly with the symptoms Princess Ankhesenementasherit had described. Sweet almond extract mixed with honey to mask the taste, she read aloud, her voice growing stronger as the full horror of the revelation became clear. Administered in small doses over the course of 3 months to avoid suspicion. The victim will experience weakness, vivid dreams, and a persistent sweet taste that physicians will be unable to explain. Seneb moved to stand beside her, his presence both comforting and electric as he pointed to another section of the documents. Look at this genealogical record. It traces Ice lineage not to the royal bloodlines of Egypt but to a Syrian merchant family. His father was a trader who gained access to the court through commercial dealings and gradually worked his way into positions of influence. The implications were staggering. If these documents were authentic, then Pharaoh I was not only a murderer but a complete fraud, a foreign usurper who had stolen the throne of Egypt through deception and poison. The very foundations of the kingdom's legitimacy had been built upon lies that reached back decades. As they continued to examine the scrolls, even more disturbing revelations emerged. Recent correspondence detailed Ice's plans to eliminate potential threats to his rule, including a chilling reference to the foreign architect whose skills are no longer needed once the tomb is completed. Seneb's name appeared on a list of individuals marked for elimination, their deaths to be arranged in ways that would appear accidental or natural. He never intended for me to survive this project, Seneb said, his voice carrying a bitter edge as he read his own death warrant. My foreign techniques were necessary to complete the tomb quickly, but my knowledge of those techniques makes me a liability that must be removed. It was then that Seneb revealed the secret he had carried since childhood, the dangerous truth about his own heritage that made their relationship not merely forbidden but potentially treasonous. His mother had been a Nubian princess, captured during one of Egypt's military campaigns and later freed by his Egyptian father, a minor official who had fallen in love with her exotic beauty and fierce intelligence. I am half Nubian, he confessed, his amber eyes searching her face for any sign of rejection or disgust. In the eyes of Egyptian law, that makes me little better than a slave, regardless of my skills or achievements. I chose me precisely because my mixed blood made me expendable. He needed my innovations but planned to eliminate me before I could become a threat to his secrets. Rather than recoiling from this revelation, Nefertari found herself drawn even closer to him. The courage it must have taken to reveal such a dangerous truth, the vulnerability he showed in trusting her with knowledge that could destroy him, only deepened her feelings for this remarkable man who had already turned her world upside down. Your blood matters nothing to me, she said, her hands reaching up to frame his face as she had seen him do to her in the garden. You are the most honorable man I have ever known, regardless of your parentage. The gods judge us by our actions, not by the circumstances of our birth. Surrounded by the evidence of conspiracy and murder, illuminated by the dancing flames of ancient torches, their attraction finally reached the breaking point that had been building since their first encounter. The danger that surrounded them, the knowledge that their time together might be measured in days rather than years, lent an urgency to their desire that could no longer be contained. When Seneb pulled her into his arms, there was nothing gentle or hesitant about the kiss they shared. It was a claiming, a declaration, a surrender to forces that had been building between them like flood waters behind a dam. Her hands tangled in his dark hair as she pressed herself against the solid warmth of his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart that matched the frantic rhythm of her own. Their lovemaking in that hidden chamber was both passionate and tender, a complete awakening for Nefertari that represented her final break from the life she had known. Surrounded by ancient mysteries and flickering shadows, she discovered pleasures she had never imagined and gave herself completely to the man who had become her entire world. Every touch, every whispered endearment, every moment of connection was precious beyond measure, knowing that it might be stolen from them at any moment by forces beyond their control. In the aftermath of their passion, as they lay entwined among the scattered scrolls and ancient secrets, they were startled by the sound of footsteps in the passage above. Seneb immediately moved to shield Nefertari, his hand reaching for the knife he always carried, but the voice that called down to them was familiar and welcome. "Master, are you down there?" Kamwasit's voice echoed through the chamber, carrying a note of urgency that sent alarm through both lovers. "I followed you from the construction site. We need to talk." The loyal assistant descended into the chamber with the sure-footed confidence of one accustomed to navigating dangerous spaces. His dark eyes took in the scene before him, the scattered documents, the evidence of recent passion, and the guilty expressions on both their faces, but his only concern was for their safety. "I have been suspicious of this entire project from the beginning," Kamwasit revealed as he examined the damning scrolls with growing alarm. "Palace guards have been talking when they think no one is listening. They speak of cleaning up loose ends once the tomb is completed, of ensuring that no witnesses remain to testify about the methods used in its construction." His street-smart awareness and network of contacts among the working classes had provided him with information that the nobility would never have access to. Servants talked, guards gossiped, and those who labored with their hands often saw and heard things that their social superiors preferred to keep hidden. "There is more," Kamwasit continued, his expression growing even more grave. "The priest Amenhotep has been asking questions about you, Master, and about the priestess as well. He has been seen near the construction site at odd hours, and there are whispers that he reports directly to palace officials about suspicious activities within the temple." The mention of Amenhotep sent a chill through Nefertari that had nothing to do with the cool air of the underground chamber. She had hoped that her absence from evening prayers might go unnoticed, but if Amenhotep was actively watching her movements, then her secret was already compromised. Unknown to the three conspirators gathered in the hidden chamber, their fears were well-founded. Amenhotep had indeed followed Nefertari from the temple, his heart torn between his duty to report suspicious behavior and his desperate love for the woman who had never shown him anything more than polite courtesy. He had discovered the concealed entrance to the underground passage but had not dared to venture inside, instead positioning himself where he could observe who entered and left the hidden space. The priest's internal struggle was genuine and painful. He truly believed that he was protecting Egypt from foreign corruption, that his reports to palace officials served the greater good of the kingdom. Yet the sight of Nefertari disappearing into a secret chamber with the foreign architect filled him with a jealousy so intense it threatened to consume his rational thought entirely. Meanwhile, in the palace, other watchers were taking note of unusual activities around the tomb construction. Spies reported to Pharaoh that his architect had been spending suspicious amounts of time examining the foundation work, often remaining at the site long after the other workers had departed. The paranoid ruler, already nervous about the approaching anniversary of Tutankhamun's death, began to wonder if his carefully laid plans were somehow being discovered. In another part of Thebes, Princess Inkhesenementasheret was conducting her own investigation into the circumstances surrounding her husband's death. The young widow had been gathering testimonies from servants who had attended the late pharaoh, documenting inconsistencies in the official accounts of his final illness. Her beauty and royal status gave her access to information that others could never obtain, and her growing network of loyal nobles provided her with resources that even she had not fully realized she possessed. It was during one of her visits to the temple, ostensibly seeking spiritual guidance for her grief, that she encountered High Priestess Nebet in circumstances that would prove fateful for all involved. The two women, each conducting separate investigations into the same conspiracy, recognized in each other kindred spirits seeking truth in a world built on lies. "I have been gathering evidence," the princess confessed during a private conversation in Nebet's chambers. "Testimonies from those who served my husband, records of his symptoms, documentation of unusual activities in the palace during his final days. I believe my husband was murdered, but I need proof that will convince others." Nebet, whose own suspicions had been growing since their previous conversation, realized that they had been investigating the same conspiracy from different angles. The combination of the princess's royal access and the high priestess's medical knowledge created a formidable alliance that could potentially expose the truth about Tutankhamun's death. There are others who share our suspicions, Nebet revealed carefully. Loyal Egyptians who have noticed inconsistencies, who question the legitimacy of the current regime. If we work together, we might be able to gather enough evidence to expose the truth. As the night wore on and the three lovers prepared to leave the hidden chamber, they were unaware that forces were already moving against them. Amenhotep, his patience finally exhausted and his jealousy overwhelming his better judgment, had made a decision that would change everything. The confrontation came the following morning as Nefertari attempted to return to her normal temple duties. Amenhotep intercepted her in a secluded corridor, his usually pale face flushed with emotion and his hands trembling with the intensity of his feelings. "I know where you were last night," he said without preamble, his voice low but carrying clearly in the empty space. "I know about the hidden chamber, about your affair with the foreign architect, about secrets that could destroy us all." The blood drained from Nefertari's face as the full implications of his knowledge struck her. Amenhotep held not only her fate but Seneb's life in his hands, and the expression in his eyes spoke of a man pushed beyond the limits of rational thought. "I have been ordered to arrest anyone showing suspicious behavior," he continued, stepping closer until she could see the desperation in his features. "But my love for you makes me offer an alternative. Marry me, renounce your foreign lover, and I will report that my investigation found nothing. You have 3 days to decide." The ultimatum hung between them like a sword suspended by the finest thread. In 3 days she would have to choose between saving the man she loved and sacrificing herself to a marriage that would be a living death. The gods, it seemed, had decided to test not only her faith but her very soul, demanding a price that might prove too high for any mortal heart to pay. As Amenhotep walked away, leaving her alone with the weight of an impossible decision, Nefertari realized that the secrets buried beneath the tomb had indeed changed the very foundations of her world. The question now was whether love would prove strong enough to survive the earthquake that was coming, or whether the forces arrayed against them would succeed in burying the truth along with all who dared to seek it. The weight of Amenhotep's ultimatum pressed down on Nefertari like the colossal stones Seneb moved across the desert. 3 days. 3 days to choose between the man who had ignited her soul and a lifetime of duty, a life she now saw as a gilded cage. The priest's words, heavy with possessive love and righteous indignation, echoed in her mind, threatening to shatter the fragile new world she had just begun to inhabit. Her heart, once so clear in its devotion to Hathor, was now a battlefield of conflicting loyalties. She sought out High Priestess Nebet in the quiet sanctum of the temple library, surrounded by scrolls of ancient wisdom. Nebet, sensing the profound distress radiating from Nefertari, looked up from a delicate papyrus, her aged eyes softening with concern. There was no need for Nefertari to speak. Her trembling hands and haunted gaze conveyed the depth of her turmoil. "My child," Nebet began, her voice a comforting balm in the turbulent storm of Nefertari's mind, "your spirit is troubled. Share what burdens your heart, for even the holiest of vessels can crack under unspoken pressure." With a trembling voice, Nefertari poured out her confession, her forbidden love for Seneb, the hidden chamber beneath the tomb, the terrifying scrolls revealing ice treachery, and finally, Amenhotep's impossible demand. As she spoke of the poisoned pharaoh and the usurper king, Nebet's expression shifted from maternal concern to a grim resolve. "I have suspected much," Nebet murmured, a glint of steel entering her wise eyes. "For months now there have been unsettling requests. Temple healers, myself included, were asked to provide detailed information about various poisons and their symptoms, specifically those that mimic natural illness. The inquiries came directly from palace physicians, ostensibly for protecting the pharaoh from assassination attempts. But the specificity of the questions, the quiet desperation in their voices, raised 1,000 red flags. Nebet explained how she had subtly cross-referenced these requests with fragmented whispers from palace servants and temple guards, tales of strange illnesses, sudden deaths, and the rapid rise of ice inner circle. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered, now began to form a horrifying picture. Nefertari's revelations were the missing keys, confirming Nebet's gravest fears. "Pharaoh I is not merely ambitious," Nebet concluded, her voice barely a whisper. "He is a viper coiled within the heart of Egypt." The knowledge that she was not alone in her suspicions, that Nebet had also been quietly investigating, brought a surge of desperate hope to Nefertari. Yet the enormity of what they faced remained. How could 2 women, a priestess and a princess, Possibly challenge a pharaoh who controlled the army, the priests, and the very narrative of Egypt. Their answers came sooner than expected. A discreet message, borne by a loyal temple guard, arrived from Princess Inkhesenementasheret, requesting a private audience with High Priestess Nebet. The princess arrived veiled, escorted by only 2 trusted palace servants, her demeanor somber yet resolute. In Nebet's private chambers, the air crackled with a palpable tension, a blend of apprehension and fierce determination. Nefertari laid out the damning scrolls from the hidden chamber, their ancient texts and recent correspondence screaming of murder and deceit. As she read aloud the descriptions of the poison's effects, the princess's composure fractured. Tears streamed down her face, silent rivers of grief and outrage. The weakness, the vivid dreams, the peculiar sweet taste, Inkhesenementasheret choked out, her voice raw with suppressed agony. It was exactly as my beloved husband suffered. They called it divine will, a passing illness, but I knew something was terribly wrong. Her delicate hands clenched, tearing at the fine linen of her mourning dress. 4 months, I have been gathering testimonies from the servants who attended him, documenting every inconsistency in the official accounts. And he has been relentless in his pursuit of me, pressuring me to marry him to legitimize his stolen throne. The princess revealed her own network, painstakingly built from the silent discontent simmering beneath ice oppressive rule. There are nobles who resent his foreign blood and his callous disregard for tradition. There are guards who question his arbitrary commands, men loyal to Egypt, not to a usurper. And there are officials who remember the true lineage of our pharaohs. She looked at Nefertari and Nebet, her eyes gleaming with a newfound strength. I have cultivated their trust, shared whispers of my suspicions, and together we have documented ice crimes. But we needed undeniable proof. We needed this. Her hands swept across the damning scrolls. With the revelation of the princess's network, a flicker of true possibility ignited within Nefertari. Her earlier despair began to recede, replaced by a fierce resolve. She understood now that running was not an option. Their love, if it was to mean anything, had to be a force for justice. Senub, meanwhile, unaware of the secret alliance forging in the temple, waited anxiously for Nefertari. He found her later that day, her face etched with a renewed determination he had not seen since his ultimatum. He immediately proposed a desperate escape. "We must flee, Nefertari," he urged, his voice laced with urgency, his hands reaching to cup her face. "Nubia. I have contacts there, master builders who value my skills, a safe haven where our love can flourish without the shadow of the pharaoh's wrath. We could start anew, build a life free from these dangers." He spoke of vast, open deserts and fertile lands, of a future where his heritage was celebrated, not condemned. But Nefertari shook her head, her gaze steady, unwavering. "No, Senub. We cannot run. Not now. Not when we hold the truth that can free Egypt from this viper. We have a duty not just to ourselves but to Tutankhamun, to the gods, to our people. To run is to condemn Egypt to a reign built on lies and blood." Kamwaset, who had been silently standing watch, stepped forward. "She is right, master," he said, his practical voice cutting through the emotional intensity. "I have spoken with some of the guards from the night shifts at the palace. They are weary of ice paranoia, his cruel punishments, his disregard for the common soldier. They speak of unrest, of a growing desire for the true blood of Egypt to return to the throne. If we can provide them with undeniable proof of ice crimes, they are willing to act. We will not be alone." Inspired by Nefertari's unyielding resolve and Kamwaset's practical assurances, Senub's desperation began to transform into strategic thought. Together, the newly formed alliance, Nefertari, Senub, Nebet, Princess Inkhesenementasheret, and Kamwaset, began to forge a coordinated plan. It would not be an escape but a calculated political maneuver, a gamble for the very soul of Egypt. They would use the upcoming tomb dedication ceremony. It was a public event, heavily attended by nobles, foreign dignitaries and common folk, a place where I intended to solidify his legitimacy. Instead, it would become his undoing. Nebet and the princess, with their combined networks, would coordinate the presentation of the evidence. The damning scrolls, the testimonies, the documented details of ice usurpation. Nefertari, as a divine servant, would be positioned to deliver a public confession, one that would serve as the signal for the revelation to begin. Her act, seemingly one of capitulation, would instead be the spark that ignited the truth. Meanwhile, Amenhotep was living his own private torment. The young priest had returned to his duties, but his mind churned with what he had seen and heard. His reports to palace officials, once a source of pride, now felt like poisoned arrows aimed at innocents. He saw the cold satisfaction in the eyes of ICE enforcers, the ruthless efficiency with which they silenced anyone deemed a threat. His patriotic fervor, once so pure, curdled into a bitter understanding that he had been manipulated, a pawn in a far more sinister game. When a whisper reached him, a chilling rumor from a loyal scribe, that I planned to eliminate all potential witnesses after the ceremony, including those loyal Egyptians who had helped him secure his reign, Amenhotep's world crumbled. His genuine love for Nefertari, coupled with his dawning realization that his own life was also on the line, threw him into a profound crisis of conscience. He had protected Egypt from foreign influence, or so he thought, only to aid a greater internal corruption. His duty to the gods, his love for Nefertari, and his fear for his own survival clashed in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. I meanwhile grew increasingly paranoid. Whispers of unrest reached his ears. Reports from his spies indicated that his architect, Seneb, was spending suspicious amounts of time examining the foundation work, and that the priestess Nefertari was not performing her duties with her usual unyielding devotion. He saw the subtle shifts in the glances of his guards, the less immediate obedience of some of his courtiers. The air, already thick with the approaching hot, dry winds of the desert, seemed to press down with an almost physical weight. Multiple characters, seasoned by years under the Egyptian sun, remarked on the unusual weather patterns, the oppressive heat, the foreboding stillness. Old-timers warned that such conditions often preceded the great sandstorms, nature's way of sweeping the desert clean. Believing he was tightening his grip, I ordered the arrest of several individuals he deemed potential threats, including Nefertari and Seneb. But this was no random act of tyranny. Unknown to I, these arrests played directly into the conspirators' hands. The princess's network, through carefully planted rumors and subtly orchestrated actions, had influenced ICE's decision, placing Nefertari and Seneb precisely where they needed to be, within the palace, under ICE direct control, and therefore, under the gaze of the public during the impending ceremony. It was a perilous game, a trap sprung, but one they intended to turn on its maker. The coordinated plan was meticulously set in motion. Every detail was accounted for, every contingency considered. But then, a variable no one could have anticipated, an act born of desperation and belated conscience, shattered their careful timing. Amenhotep, his face pale and eyes wild with a mixture of terror and resolve, found his way to I. Not to betray Nefertari, not to solidify his position, but in a desperate, misguided attempt to prevent the bloodshed he now knew was coming. He warned I, hinting at the conspiracy, hoping his warning would force the pharaoh to abandon his murderous plan, or at least to delay it. Instead, I's fury, ignited by the priest's stammering warnings and the undeniable truth they implied, burned hotter than any desert sun. This last-minute change of heart, this act of a man lost between two worlds, forced the conspirators to accelerate their timeline. They would have to improvise during the ceremony, trusting in their courage, their truth, and their unwavering loyalty to Egypt to guide them through the perilous hours ahead. The countdown to destiny had begun. The air in Thebes was a suffocating blanket on the day of the tomb dedication ceremony. A hot, dry wind, carrying the scent of distant sand and an unsettling stillness, had swept across the city since dawn, making every breath a struggle. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, thousands had gathered. Nobles in their finest linen robes, foreign dignitaries draped in silks and jewels, priests in their ceremonial white, and the teeming masses of common people jostled for space. All eyes were fixed on the newly completed monument, a grand, imposing structure that rose like a defiance against the pale sky, destined to be Pharaoh I's eternal resting place. But beneath the facade of celebration, a tremor of unease rippled through the crowd. Whispers of arrests, of conspiracies, of the pharaoh's increasingly erratic behavior, clung to the air like the desert dust. Deep within the palace, in a cold, stone cell, Nefertari and Seneb clung to each other, their bodies pressed close, seeking solace against the chill of uncertainty and the heat of their shared destiny. The faint sounds of the gathering crowd reached them, a muffled roar that seemed to herald their final hour. Seneb's hands cupped Nefertari's face, his amber eyes, usually so bright with intelligence, now shadowed with a profound sadness. "My love," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "it is not too late. There must be another way. Do not sacrifice yourself. Flee with me. We can find a life, a true life, away from all of this." His fingers traced the delicate curve of her jaw, a silent plea. Nefertari leaned into his touch, her own heart aching with the weight of her decision. "There is no other way, Seneb," she replied, her voice firm despite the tremor in her soul. "Justice demands this. Our love, our truth, must be a torch to expose the darkness. We will find each other again in this life or the next. The gods will guide us." Their lips met in a tender, lingering kiss, a desperate promise exchanged in the face of oblivion. It was a kiss that held a lifetime of unspoken dreams, a yearning for a future that might never be. Kamwasit, imprisoned in the same cell, watched them, his usually cheerful face solemn. "The princess's network is in place, Master Priestess," he murmured, his voice low. "The whispers have spread. Many guards, those who remember Pharaoh Tutankhamun with honor, are having second thoughts. They resent ice brutality. They will not stand against truth when it is revealed." His words offered a fragile thread of hope, but the risks remained immense. Meanwhile, Amenhotep, a man consumed by the fires of guilt and belated patriotism, moved through the palace like a ghost. His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drumbeat of regret. After his desperate, failed warning to Ai, he found himself shunned, his earlier loyalty now seen as a liability. Tormented by the knowledge of what he had set in motion, he sought out High Priestess Nebet. He found her in a quiet antechamber, her face serene despite the chaos brewing around them. "Revered mother," he choked out, falling to his knees, his hands trembling. "Forgive me. I warned him. I thought I could prevent it. But he is a monster. He plans to kill them all. He plans to kill everyone who has ever questioned him." He confessed the full depth of ice paranoia, revealing crucial details about the palace's security arrangements for the ceremony, the hidden detachments of loyal guards, the escape routes I had prepared, the secret signals for execution. "I can help," he pleaded, his eyes desperate. "Let me redeem myself." Nebet listened, her gaze unwavering. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet understanding. "Rise, Amenhotep," she commanded. "The gods forgive those who truly seek redemption. There is still a part to play. One that will require the greatest courage." Back in the ceremony square, a hush fell over the restless crowd as Pharaoh Ai appeared. He emerged from the tomb's grand entrance, bathed in the harsh afternoon light, his body encased in ceremonial gold, his face a mask of supreme confidence. Yet, a keen observer might have noticed a flicker of nervousness in his eyes, a slight tension in his jaw as he scanned the immense crowd. The oppressive heat, combined with the swirling dust, added to the uncomfortable atmosphere. "People of Egypt." Ai's voice boomed, amplified by the natural acoustics of the monumental tomb. "Today, we consecrate this eternal resting place for our blessed predecessor, Pharaoh Tutankhamun. And in doing so, we cleanse our sacred land of impurities that seek to undermine divine order." His gaze swept to the holding pens where the prisoners were kept, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "These traitors, these blasphemers who have dared to defy the will of the gods and the sacred authority of the throne, will be executed as part of this hallowed ceremony. Their deaths will consecrate this tomb and purify our nation." A mixed reaction rippled through the crowd. Some dutifully cheered, their voices thin and strained in the heat. But a significant number murmured uneasily, their faces clouded with doubt. Rumors, carefully nurtured by the princess's network, had spread like wildfire. They spoke of the unjust arrests, of the true lineage of the throne, of the pharaoh's foreign ways. The tension was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Nefertari was brought forward first, her white linen robes shimmering like moonlight against the dusty earth. Her head was held high, her eyes fixed on some distant point, a silent prayer on her lips. Ai's voice cut through the air, sharp and demanding. "Confess, priestess. Confess your sacrilege, your unholy alliance with the foreign sorcerer. Confess your sins before the gods and the people of Egypt." Instead of the simple, broken confession I expected, Nefertari drew herself to her full height. Her voice, though soft at first, resonated with a power that silenced the murmurs and drew every eye. "I confess," she declared, her voice ringing clear. "I confess to breaking my vows to Hathor. I confess to loving a man whose very being challenges the ancient ways." A gasp rippled through the crowd. This was not the confession they expected. "But my love," she continued, her voice gaining strength, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the people, "my pure, true love, led me not to sin but to truth. To a greater sin, a crime that stains this sacred land." The oppressive wind seemed to intensify, swirling dust around her as she spoke. "I admit to breaking my vows for love, but I accuse Pharaoh Ai of a far greater crime. The murder of the rightful pharaoh, Tutankhamun. the usurpation of the throne of Egypt. Her words were like a lightning bolt, electrifying the masses. This was the signal. From the section reserved for nobles, Princess Ankhesenementasherit stepped forward, her regal figure cutting through the stunned silence. She was flanked by High Priestess Nebet and several prominent nobles, their faces grim but determined. In her hands, the princess held the damning scrolls from the hidden chamber, now carefully arranged, ready to be presented. Listen, people of Egypt. Princess Ankhesenementasherit's voice, though elegant, carried a fierce conviction. The words of the divine servant are true. My husband, Pharaoh Tutankhamun, was murdered, not by divine will, but by the hand of the man who now sits upon his throne. She began to unroll the scrolls, her voice detailing the poison's insidious effects, the secret correspondence, the falsified lineage of I. This man I is no son of Egypt's royal blood. He is the son of a Syrian merchant, who infiltrated our court and stole the throne through deceit and assassination. Behind her, Nebet presented the testimonies of servants and healers, their words confirming the symptoms, the peculiar taste, the sudden unexplained weakness. The carefully gathered evidence was overwhelming, impossible to dismiss. The collective gasp of the crowd was like a wave, rising and falling with the weight of the revelation. Faced with exposure, Ice's mask of composure shattered. His eyes, once confident, now burned with a desperate fury. Seize them. Kill them all. Now, he shrieked, his voice raw with rage, giving the secret signal to his loyal guard detachments. But as his most loyal guards moved forward, a shocking defiance unfolded. Many of the soldiers in the main ranks, those who had heard Kamwasit's whispers, who knew of the princess's network, hesitated. They looked at their comrades, then at the princess, their faces contorted with doubt. A few brave souls among them lowered their weapons. Others simply stood still, refusing to obey. The seeds of unrest, carefully planted throughout the kingdom, blossomed into open defiance. The defection was not sudden, but an organic conclusion of the growing discontent. Amidst the chaos, as Ice's remaining loyalists attacked, Amenhotep, seeking to redeem his soul, moved with a sudden, fierce determination. He threw himself in front of Nefertari as a loyalist guard swung a sword, deflecting the blow with his body. Go, Nefertari. Run, he gasped, blood blossoming on his white robes. He fell, his eyes finding hers. Forgive me, my love. His last breath a whisper of devotion and repentance. As loyalist guards clashed with those now siding with the princess, the long-building sandstorm finally broke. A roaring, golden wall of sand descended upon the ceremony square, engulfing everything in a swirling, blinding chaos. The crowd shrieked, scattering in all directions. The wind howled like 1,000 angry spirits, whipping sand into stinging torrents. Many interpreted it as divine judgment, the fury of the gods unleashed upon the usurper. In the swirling, blinding maelstrom, Seneb, witnessing Amenhotep's sacrifice and the ensuing chaos, burst from his bonds. His strength, fueled by love and a desperate need to protect Nefertari, was immense. He fought through the thick sand, his amber eyes piercing the gloom, seeking her. He found her amidst the melee, battered but unharmed, and pulled her to him, shielding her with his body as the storm raged. I, abandoned by most of his guards, found himself cornered, his golden regalia dulled by the choking dust. Traitors! All of you, he screamed, his voice hoarse. He pointed a trembling finger at Seneb, who stood defiantly with Nefertari. This is sacrilege. The gods will strike you down. I am the rightful pharaoh. I demand trial by combat. The gods will prove my righteousness. Seneb, his heart pounding but his gaze steady, accepted the challenge. So be it, usurper. Let the gods judge. The two men faced each other in the heart of the storm, a tempest of sand and fury. I fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, his strikes wild and powerful. But Seneb, with his architect's mind, moved with precision. He used his knowledge of leverage, of angles, of the shifting ground beneath their feet. He dodged, parried, and used Ice's own momentum against him, a dance of intellect against brute force. Finally, with a perfectly timed movement, Seneb disarmed I, sending the pharaoh's ceremonial dagger clattering to the dust-choked ground. I fell, defeated, covered in sand, his golden mask of power irrevocably shattered. Seneb stood over him, his chest heaving. He did not deliver a final blow. Instead, he looked at the scattered crowd, those who had remained, those who had chosen to witness this divine judgment. Let the people decide his fate, he roared, his voice cutting through the dying echoes of the storm. The people, no longer silenced by fear, emboldened by Nefertari's courage and the undeniable evidence, roared back. Their voices, unified and strong, condemned him. Exile. His name erased, they cried, their verdict swift and merciless. Stripped of his titles, his dignity and his power, was led away, his reign ended by the very people he had sought to control. As the last tendrils of the sandstorm faded, revealing a sky washed clean and a world transformed, Princess Ankhesenementaseret stepped forward. She was proclaimed the rightful ruler of Egypt, her voice clear and strong as she addressed her people. With the unwavering support of Nebet, the loyal priests, the now unified nobles, and a military that had returned to its true allegiance, a new dawn broke over Egypt. In gratitude for their unparalleled courage, the new queen pardoned Nefertari's broken vows, declaring that her love had served a higher purpose. She granted Seneb a position of honor, naming him royal architect, tasking him with rebuilding Egypt's infrastructure and, symbolically, its trust. More importantly, she gave them her blessing, declaring their union a testament to the power of truth and a blessing from the gods themselves. Nefertari and Seneb stood side by side, their hands clasped, gazing at the horizon as the setting sun cast long golden shadows across the newly cleansed city. The storm had passed, revealing not just a new landscape but a new future. They had defied the odds, challenged a tyrant, and found their love amidst the ruins of deceit. Their journey had been fraught with peril, their path illuminated by hidden truths, but they had emerged together into the light of a new, hopeful Egypt. Their love, born in secrets and forged in fire, was now a legend, echoing through the halls of history. 5 years had passed like the swift currents of the Nile since the dust settled on the Pharaoh's tomb, and with it, the truth of Ice's treacherous reign. Thebes, once suffocated by a tyrant's fear, now breathed freely under the wise and compassionate rule of Queen Ankhesenementaseret. The city, vibrant and bustling, was a testament to the new dawn that had broken over Egypt, a dawn born from courage, sacrifice, and an impossible love. Nefertari, no longer solely a priestess confined by ancient vows, walked with a different grace now, one imbued with quiet authority and profound wisdom. She was Queen Ankhesenementaseret's most trusted advisor, her voice sought not only for matters of faith but for affairs of state. Her days were spent not just in ritual but in reformation. The temple, once a fortress of tradition, had opened its doors wider, its wisdom made more accessible. Nefertari had spearheaded reforms that emphasized compassion, broadened access to sacred texts, and ensured that spiritual guidance was a balm for the people, not a tool for power. There had been subtle resistance, of course, from those who clung to the old rigid ways, but Nefertari, with the queen's unwavering support and her own gentle but firm resolve, guided Egypt towards a more inclusive spiritual future. Her eyes, once dark pools of contained emotion, now held a serene light, reflecting the peace she had found in purpose. Seneb, the foreign architect whose genius had once been deemed sacrilegious, was now celebrated as the royal architect, his innovations woven seamlessly into the fabric of Egyptian grandeur. Thebes bore the mark of his vision. New public buildings rose, blending the majestic solidity of traditional Egyptian stonework with lighter, more efficient foreign engineering. There were temples with courtyards designed for communal gathering rather than solemn, exclusive rites, administrative buildings that were both beautiful and immensely practical. His work, once viewed with suspicion, was now seen as divinely inspired, a testament to the gods' favor for progress. He still had calluses on his hands, a proud reminder of his honest labor, but his eyes held the faraway look of a dreamer, constantly envisioning the next grand structure, the next architectural marvel that would serve the people and stand as a monument to truth, not tyranny. Kamwaset, his loyal assistant, had risen to become his chief foreman, a trusted confidant and friend, forever by his side, overseeing the intricate details of Seneb's grand designs. Their camaraderie was a steady presence, a quiet joy in their demanding lives. Their love, once a secret whispered in moonlit gardens and hidden chambers, had blossomed into a profound, enduring bond. It was a love forged in the fires of conspiracy and sealed by shared risk, tempered by the passage of time and the quiet rhythm of domesticity. The initial breathless passion had deepened into an unbreakable understanding, a silent language spoken through glances across a crowded room, a comforting hand resting on a weary shoulder, a shared smile over a whispered secret. They had built a home not merely of brick and mortar, but of unwavering trust and profound mutual respect. And within that home, the miracle of new life had graced them. Their children, a son with Seneb's vibrant amber eyes and a daughter with Nefertari's cascade of dark hair, filled their days with laughter and light. They were spirited, curious children, constantly exploring, their innocence a balm against the lingering shadows of their parents' past. The boy, young Seti, already showed a fascination with building blocks, stacking them meticulously, while his sister, little Hathor, possessed her mother's graceful movements, her joy radiating like the sun. They were the living embodiments of the new Egypt, children born of truth and a love that had defied all odds. Their evenings often found them on the terrace of their modest, elegant home overlooking the Nile, the river a silver ribbon winding through the fertile land. It was a ritual now, a quiet moment of reflection after the demands of the day. And often, their gazes would drift towards the horizon, to the towering monument that had once been Ice's tomb. It was still a tomb, but its purpose had been profoundly repurposed. Queen Ankhesenementashet, with Nefertari's guidance and Seneb's skill, had transformed it into a grand mausoleum dedicated to the memory of all those who had fallen under Ice's tyranny, a stark reminder of the cost of deceit and the triumph of justice. Its imposing facade, once threatening, now stood as a symbol of remembrance, of truth unveiled, and of a kingdom that would never again forget its past. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, their children chased each other across the courtyard, their joyous cries echoing in the twilight. Nefertari would lean her head against Seneb's shoulder, a sigh of contentment escaping her lips. "Sometimes," she mused, her voice soft, "I remember that night in the hidden chamber, surrounded by scrolls of betrayal and shadows of danger. It feels like a lifetime ago, yet it shaped everything." Seneb would squeeze her hand, his gaze fixed on the vibrant antics of their children. "It was the crucible, my heart. It took everything from us, but it gave us everything too. It gave us this." His gesture encompassed their home, their children, the peaceful city, and the enduring bond between them. The memory of Amenhotep, the priest who had loved Nefertari with a desperate, misguided devotion and who had found his redemption in sacrifice, still lingered, a poignant reminder of the high price paid for their truth. His unmarked grave, known only to a few, was a quiet testament to the complex web of human loyalties and betrayals that had paved the way for this new era. His final, whispered words, though painful, were a testament to the transformative power of a love that, even in its unrequited form, had ultimately chosen the side of truth. His sacrifice ensured that their path was illuminated, that their lives and Egypt's future would be free. Nefertari knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that their love was not merely a personal triumph. It was a living story, woven into the very fabric of Egypt's rebirth. It had endured the storms, transcended the boundaries of tradition, and whispered its truth across the ages. Some loves are written in stone, destined to crumble with time. But theirs was written in the stars, eternal as the Nile, enduring as the pyramids, and as infinite as the desert sands that had witnessed their triumph. And so, we close the final chapter of Secrets Buried in Gold, a tale woven from the very fabric of ancient Egypt, yet echoing with timeless truths that resonate even today. From the hushed sanctity of Hathor's temple to the swirling sands of destiny, we witnessed the extraordinary journey of Nefertari and Seneb, two souls who dared to defy a world intent on keeping them apart. What powerful lessons can we draw from their epic romance? We learn, first and foremost, that love in its purest form is not merely a feeling but a force, a relentless current that can carve new paths, shatter ancient chains, and ignite revolutions. Their passion wasn't just a whisper between two hearts. It became the thunder that brought down a tyrant and rebuilt a kingdom. We also learned the profound strength of truth. No matter how deeply buried, how cunningly concealed, truth possesses an undeniable power to surface, to expose darkness, and to cleanse what is corrupt. Nefertari and Seneb, aided by brave allies like Princess Ankhesenementashet and the wise Nebet, chose to champion this truth, even when it demanded unimaginable sacrifice. And in doing so, they reminds us that standing for what is right, even against overwhelming odds, is always a battle worth fighting. And perhaps, most poignantly, we are shown the transformative beauty of courage. The courage to love beyond societal norms, the courage to question injustice, and the courage to sacrifice for a greater good. Even characters like Amenhotep, lost in his own complexities, found a moment of profound courage in his final act, reminding us that redemption can bloom even in the harshest soil. Their story tells us that while the price of truth may be high, the cost of silence can be far greater. Dear viewers, did this tale of ancient love and monumental courage stir your own heart? Did it transport you to the sun-drenched banks of the Nile, where destinies were forged and empires transformed? I invite you with all my heart to share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite moment? Which character's journey resonated most deeply with you? And to know who stayed with us until the very end of this grand saga, please type the word destiny in your comment. If you were captivated by the drama, the passion, and the intricate weave of power and love in this story, then you're in luck. There are many more narratives awaiting you. Make sure to check the other stories I'm leaving for you in the cards, where forbidden desires and epic struggles unfold against breathtaking backdrops. Subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and join our growing community of romance and history lovers. Until our next journey into the annals of time, may your own lives be filled with as much love, courage, and truth as Nefertari and Seneb found under the Egyptian sun. Thank you for watching, and may your destiny be as bright as the morning stars over Thebes.